You got comp. Oh,
Oh no.
I don't care. I'm gonna just.
Nope, Jack's just killed the game.
I'm just gonna walk in and Sunfire and Moonfire and pressing buttons.
In this, well, let's see. In this video, I will talk about why these god comps are worse than prior expansions and how Blizzard's planning and tuning, coupled with predictable player nature, are the primary causes, which is probably very true. So we got some points here that Dakar on our team has drafted up here. So very limited testing windows, non-ethics keys, no proper item level scaling, and little to no tuning in PTR have yet again set things up for failure, and the need for many waves of hotfixes, not only for the dungeons but also classes and specs. The health of mobs wasn't scaled up enough from testing, so crowd control is king, trumping the damage output of the group when you're in higher level keys, which obviously will then bias your comp towards people who have got good predictable CC. So apparently the new god comp, right, is we got Vengeance TH. We've got Ogvoker. What a surprise! Oh my god.
Flabbergasted is the term.
Of course, Ogvoker does a lot of damage by, giving other people damage. So, you got a lot of damage there. And yeah, you got Oppressing Roar, Sigil of Silence, which can then be extended by Oppressing Roar to fully lock down mobs for a long time. And it's the weird thing, right? We were talking about this in Guild, one of the raids. It was me and Pop, who's also our Discipline Priest. She's way better Discipline Priest than I am, with way more gear. I should play WoW more. IRL be busy, man. But actually, it should be less busy soon. I'll have things to talk about. Anyway, she was saying, like, no, don't take away our PI. It's fun PIing people. And that's the thing.
But it's fun.
The way that I can just, be like, hey, Luke, and then he goes, woo, does more damage.
Does 400k on pull.
Yeah, it's great. Because it feels fun. And then that's the thing, because this here, of an Ogvoker oppressing, roaring, and, extending a Sigil of Silence, that's really, that should be good game design, shouldn't it? Mm-hmm. Great, cooperative play, awesome. And then, do you know what ends up being weird? There's a little goblin that appears that just says, hey, bring the player, not the class. And then we're stuck into the same old, do we bring the player, not the class? Or do we have class identity? What do we do? That has been the, freaking prevailing WoW discussion for such a long time. Be it Wrath, be it, I think Wrath is where it was really coined. I think it was, Ghostcrawler was talking about that. But yeah, interesting problem.
I just love, the conversation, because every time in my head I'm just listening to it, it's like, what you're arguing for is, do we set the thermostat to minimum or maximum? And you go, bro, what? Did you ever hear of the middle?
Oh, I clearly set it to echo.
Yeah, did you ever hear of
That was bad.
Yeah, that's awful. Yeah. So, yeah, straight up, okay, what if we set it to, somewhere in the middle? Or what if there's class identity and we look at outliers that are really dangerous and kind of take it down a little bit? Because that's even the part where, imagine they just nerfed PI a wee bit. So it's less of an outlier. It's like, well, what, is the problem the principle or the result? I think that's I should say, is the problem the principle or the outcome? Because a lot of times people will say, well, the principle's the problem because obviously that's how we got here. Then you go, no, just fix the outcome. It's like, yeah, just nerf it.
I guess what's interesting...
Just tune it down.
Interesting here is, this is going to be from that higher end perspective. Even looking at some of the video comments here, people are like, I'm at 2940, IO Mistweaver.
Yeah.
And you're like,
fucking good for you, holy shit.
The difference between tanks has never been such a large gap. I have a friend who mains Brewmaster, and I found running keys with him is significantly harder than with a Vengeance DH, despite him being a great Brewmaster. The same can't be said for Blood DK, Prot Warrior, and Guardian. The immense amount of group-wide damage control is just leagues above others. So then it's quite strange, because a solution to this, and this is where it kind of gets interesting, is to give everyone the god comp, by which I mean homogenize utility across classes and specs, so that then, to access that, immense amount of CC that is disproportionately useful in an infinite scaling world. Everyone can get that. But now we have less class identity.
Yeah.
Because, you could even say, well, we'll have a different flavor of CC from this class to this class, but you have 13 classes. You can't make 13 different flavors of CC, not really. not in terms of your fundamentals. So it's a really, it's a challenging problem from Blizz, because if they are going to have differentiation in these types of CC, they're going to have this problem. That's just the way it's going to be.
And not even just CC, in literally everything.
Yeah.
There's always going to be like that kind of difference. You have access to certain tools, and it's the same thing that happens in every single video game that's in any capacity competitive, like, and has a level of difficulty to it. There will always be a meta. The only difference that actually, like, what actually shows up here is where does the meta appear? Does the meta appear for me? Am I ever going to get declined because people whisper in my boomkin and I say yeah, and they go, and not invite me? Is that going to be made like 10 to 12 to 15? Like, is that going to be a thing? Or am I going to be fine until it hits 2025? Or is it fine until you go to like, you're hitting 28 or 29 or something like that, where it's literally only the top 20 players give a shit, and then it trickles down? Because obviously a trickle down of meta is probably going to stop at some point or close enough to it. And it's like, if it's flat enough, it might not matter for so long. And it's just, it's frustrating to me because it's just the optimizing the fun out of it in a way. Yeah. And that's the thing where, like, a 2940 Mistweaver, yeah, you're 2940. Like, that's pretty fucking high. You're starting to get out of, like, the range of Blizzard should give a fuck about you. And that's, like, that sounds rude. But it's still like, no, there's definitely a point where, yeah, if you want things to be different, they have to be different. They cannot be the same and also different. It's like, oh, well, okay, well, what would you, like, maybe there's a case of, like, just flattening, and, like, clearly it's not flat enough in a bunch of ways. But it's like, it's going to happen eventually. At some point, someone will say Vengeance Demon Hunter is better. Why? Because it has this thing that is better for these 4 dungeons than the other one. Maybe you get a point where it's, okay, well, Vengeance Demon Hunter is good for these 4 dungeons, and Proc Paladin is good for these 4 dungeons because they have specific tools. It's like, yeah, that's just homogenization. People don't like that. Because what happens here, and this is kind of interesting, there's a way to do it in talents, right? But, like, the thing that's kind of scuppy is you homogenize for the top end, and that spreads across the entire player base.
Does indeed.
Balance does not do that to the same extent. Homogenization is the top 100 Mythic Plus players are kind of frustrated that in order to be the top 100 Mythic Plus players, they have to play a class that they're not super fond of. And it's like, well, how do we fix that? Yeah, well, what if we make no one have fun? Which is obviously, that's an exaggeration, but what if we then reduce the thing for everyone across the entire game? And that's, like, ultimately where I think the, like, homogenization problem comes from. And I'm just like, no, make these fucking things different, and then just have a team that addresses them, flatten it where possible, and just try to flatten it so it's not that bad. Because, and this is a thing that I always kind of notice, there's people the people at the top end are always going to have problems, because they're never not going to have, because
they're the top end of any game works typically.
Yeah, because they are breaking the game because of the infinite scaling. You'll see less of this in.
Oh yes, Blizzard has literally designed a self-breaking game.
Yeah,
that's what infinite scaling does in a situation like this.
Yeah, it's the same when you're playing, like, Risk of Rain. And it's like, well, what are you going to do? Well, obviously the whole point is to get busted as hell. That's literally the point. It's almost like you're playing Vampire Survivors and you're complaining about not having to, like, dodge anymore. You're like, yeah, that's the point of the game. And the point of this is to be so hard you can't do it, which is pushing their classes to the absolute limits, which means a 0.1% difference in capability becomes the only thing that matters at a certain point. And that's kind of what's happening here a lot of the time. And, like, obviously there's a pretty big cultural problem where I see people saying, like, who's there? Yeah, I had people deny me on normal rigs. I was running balanced druid. Yeah, that's people being dumb. I don't really know what you do about that, but homogenization isn't really the answer.
Yeah.
I think the answer for that is, ironically, the answer to that is make it easy enough that it's fine. or go for cyclical balance and just change it randomly. Just change it randomly over the week. So happens. I think. Something else. I know as a survival, the higher you get, the less people care as long as you play well and have good logs. Yeah, player base at lower levels live by tier lists. That is one of that's like a cultural perception problem. And I think that can be solved as long as the balance is reasonably good for long enough. But there isn't really too much to like actually solve that. I don't know, I see people demanding OGs and like 14 keys. Yeah. Like it's not an easy solve. It is pretty awkward. But I mean, yeah, good point, Souls. And if you're getting denied a raid because your class, it might be because you're not doing well and the class is an excuse. So I wouldn't say the class would be an excuse in that case, but what I would say is if you have like decent logs and you go, yeah, well, I have proven I can do this, and go for it. And if you don't have logs, then it is the rough situation of get a guild. Get a guild.
So much is solved by that.
Yep, and that sounds pretty like awful as like in like a dismissive way, but it sort of is kind of the point of the way this where the responsibility lies for the gameplay experience is kind of weird, where it is ultimately down to you at the end of the day, and being denied a little bit or for a couple of groups sucks ass. But it won't be the end of the world, and persistence will actually kind of get you there. Maybe you're applying for groups that are literally like, basically, you see the note and it's like, there's a group blasting a wipe. It's like maybe if you apply for a group that's just someone who's clearly stoned and just like, I'm going to see how this raid goes. You apply for that group, you're probably in, which is better. And that's the thing where that's actually happened. That's one of the things that I would never like pug a raid, probably, because I couldn't be bothered with that shit. I just do it with the guild. But when I did do that a lot more, I would always opt for the shittier looking raids, because I would like obviously not have logs and that stuff like that. Once I had curve and logs, then I'd apply for the good ones. But there is a little bit of a you do have to figure things out in that sense. Forsaken Wolf, size and bad availability in small server. Yeah, there is a case of sometimes it just sucks, and Blizzard can make small steps to fix community issues, because this is more of a community and cultural issue than there's anything else. And some of it boils down to the like I was talking about, people want the easy challenge, the easy clear the thing and it's over. That's kind of...
Well, Matt, I've just received word from a trusted source.
Oh dear.
Liquid THD has just tweeted, just a reminder, it's never too late to delete Augmentation Evoker.
It is too late because that shows weakness. And also...
That's what I love from throwing a THD tweet at Matt.
Yeah, it's just a fucking fly to swat, isn't it? Like...
You see, it's great. Yeah. You only look at basic reactions and comebacks.
That's fine, but also fuck off. Like, it's an element of people are allowed to speak to their own incentives and their own desire and stuff. But if you're speaking to your own incentive and own desire, then you can't be too mad when someone with a different incentive or desire tells you to fuck off. That's kind of thing. They can always, there are always going to be meta chasers, but most
I wonder.
Like obviously, there is that point of tryhards are really annoying, but meta. Good players aren't, and then the best are again, because it's a case of like it's almost like what was I about to say? Terrain? What the fuck is wrong with my brain? There's this just slice of these players that think they're good, they're not. These players are good. And this is where anything actually matters. It's just that what matters skips this bit because it doesn't matter here and they know it. And then goes this bit where they think it matters and it doesn't. Yeah. Which is kind of awkward.
And it is it's one of those things where this is an infinite problem in gaming. Yeah, I hate to say there is no easy solution here, so I don't really belabor it too much more. Yeah. Just that, the traditional problem that rears its head is doing so again. I think Jack isn't exactly advocating for any extreme solutions here. I think he's more just saying careful and early tuning, balancing work, a little bit more of a focus in this kind of problem on LFR. And ultimately what will be in people's heads is Season 1 will have had meta picks, but not a god comp. So sometimes we can talk in absolutes when, to maybe people who are most at the top, it's going to be something in terms of degrees. And maybe we are just, the thermostat is a few degrees too high, and it needs to be lower.
Yeah, there was something else I wanted to say. I was just saying the problem is you also have people like Tettles releasing bullshit videos on M Plus suggesting you reroll to the meta classes. Like, just stop. That's an interesting one because...
No, it's not his fault, because like, what his job is to, for the very high-end Mythic Plus audience who want the, good quality information on what is efficacious in, along their chosen goals. Maybe it would be easier if you started off by saying, hello, fellow re-rollers, here's what we're doing this week. I know that's fair. I'm not trying to roast you or anything, but it's like providing a legitimate service for the people who want that. I suppose so much of this, right, so much of the problem is people take that way out of context. I'm not saying you are, by the way, not at all. I mean, like, when the God Comp was happening in Season 2 and people were complaining that, like, they just could not get into keys in the group finder. And, if you're talking about a 15 or a 20, God Comp shouldn't matter. Because so much of this, so much of these Mythic Plus things, they're a problem whenever number scaling means you literally cannot survive Tyrannical without pulling some bullshit. Or maybe cannot survive a certain mob pack and Fortified without pulling some bullshit.
Yeah. That's more or less what I was going to say. It's like, it doesn't...
Like, what if Mythic Raids had Mythic Plus? And, it just, the percentages went up and up and up and up. There would then be, there'd be a time where the only way you could get through a certain part of a boss is to pull some cheesy bullshit. Because that's the nature of infinite scaling.
Mm-hmm.
So it's quite tricky for Blizzard's, from Blizzard's sort of position then. Though I suppose it's like, 28s, 29s, that's really as high as it goes, right?
Yeah, more or less.
For most people.
More or less.
I wonder, right, I'm not advocating for this, but how much of this, if Mythic Plus was clamped at Mythic Plus 20, how much of this would still be a discussion? And I don't mean that as like a comeback or a slapdown. I mean, legitimately, I would be interested because the God Comp still would perform best, but perhaps it wouldn't be as literally required to get past certain mechanics or packs. And maybe there's, I don't know, something in that. Basically, TLDR, infinite scaling, very hard.
Yeah.
When it hits your game design.
Design thing to break. Everyone looks at it and goes, why is this breaking? Why is this thing that says on the side, this will break when pushed too far?
Yeah,
why is it breaking when pushed too far?
Why has Blizzard designed a mechanic in these mobs that's literally impossible outside of specific situations?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not a design choice. That's a design choice that's a result of scaling, not a result of Blizzard doing game design.
Yeah.
So, what interesting fun. What other things are there to talk about?
I love fun. I wish I could have it again.
Oh my! Well, Japan is taking him out. There you go. Sorry, Matt, you've peaked. It's never going to be like this again.
Fuck! I hate this country and everyone in it.
Certainly, after being in America and then coming back to Northern Ireland, you do just sort of think like, I suppose there's a reason. Those Americans, they seem to have a lot of positivity and gumption. Mm-hmm. You come back here and everyone's self-deprecating. Nah. Why would I do that? It'll probably be shite. I'll stay inside instead.